I think for some reason this is just it. No disrespect to Islam, but I think Dustin's gonna get it done.
Really?
I don't know how. I could see him knocking him out. I could also see him maybe for once catching the gilly on somebody, but I don't know.
So if Dustin hits the gilly on Islam, does he surpass Khabib as the greatest lightweight of all time?
You know, arguments can be made.
Let me present my case.
30-8. What could be retired? 22-0?
29 now. But
Was it 29-0?
Islam's record in the Dustin's record in the UFC is 22-7.
22-7.
Pretty sure Khabib's is 13-0. Wait, Dustin was in the WEC?
Yep.
Okay. So if we're counting that as UFC wins, then he's 23-8.
Yeah. So it even goes back to the argument that people make about bantamweight. They say, who's the bantamweight GOAT? They say Sterling because of UFC, and then they say, well, Dominic Cruz has been fighting championship title fights since WEC, which I do think those title fights were 3 rounds back then. So things are a little bit different now. But I think if you're going to count that, then for Dustin, you should also count the WC wins as well.
Yeah.
So this is my metric. The record is one thing, but something about strength of schedule, to me, as a competitor, it matters.
Yes, I agree.
And
then like who you've beaten.
Who you've beaten. Yeah, you can say, well, you never lost a round, you've never even seen your own blood. Like, those things are also important. I get that stuff as well, but
that's
strength
fair.
of schedule,
it's like scary if you're the scariest fighter.
In what sense?
That's a good argument for that. Like Khabib's the scariest fighter.
Why?
Because of how dominant he was.
Oh, because of how
dominant. But if you're looking
See,
at like best resume,
yes,
which is like I always make that argument like with like the Jordan and LeBron debate is like
100%.
Like who had the best peak? Michael Jordan, but who like has the most career accomplishments and better duration of career and all that? Then I think LeBron.
LeBron is
so
in that
and then it's like,
sure.
how do you measure who's the GOAT? And what do you prioritize when you make your argument? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's
so
why
it's
this
the same
is
thing. It's same with like when Charles was the champ. We had this discussion about Khabib and Charles. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's why it's a great talking point, because I think everyone's criteria is very, very different. So for me,
yeah,
strength of schedule matters. Frequency matters. Even I know people will say, but if you could sit down and come back and just win, then that should count for something. Yeah, that kind of counts for something as well. Kind of like a John Jones taking 3 years off, coming back and then dominating Cyril Gane. Like, stuff like that does matter. But in terms of the long haul, like, you can't discredit all of John's other title wins. Like, he has one of the most winningest title reigns ever, which is as long as Khabib's win streak in the UFC. Like, that's insanity to me. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So when I look at that, I think it'd be hard to deny that Dustin, if he wins and caps off his career, because like he said, he doesn't think he has another title run in him if he were not to win this one. If he goes out and hits the gilly or gets a knockout or TKO or decision, whatever, over Islam Makhachev, the next coming of the next best guy in lightweight, he beats him. I think you look at the complexity of his career and the entire thing from the WC to the UFC, interim champion, fought for the belt 3 times, beat the who's of this division. I think it'd be hard pressed not to dub him. I don't want to say the GOAT, but
because Khabib beat Dustin for the title.
Because Khabib he did.
So,
but then
I feel like it's hard to make that case. But
that was then. This is now, and I know like even if I were to lose somebody in my pro debut and then we fought 10 years later after I've had 20 more fights, it's a completely different version of myself. I'm not saying that Khabib now wouldn't be able to compete with Dustin, but I think you have to look at all those things. Even like they said, me and Sandhagen, they would like to see us run that back because they don't think I would just take him down as easily as I did the first time. Well, the fight happened, and that's the way the fight went. Whether or not that would happen this time, probably be completely different of a fight. Mm-hmm. But if we're looking at what actually happened in the results, Khabib did win, and he did finish the fight.
So it's hard to say, if you could really put Dustin over him. at this point. Because also, 2 fights ago he got knocked out
which is
by a guy who got knocked out.
Yeah, which is crazy.
So it's
by
like
a guy not even in his division, by a guy that he beat
yeah, and it's not
twice.
like
He beat him twice.
He beat Max twice.
He beat Max twice. Finished him when Max's UFC debut.
What?
Max was only 4-0, I think.
Dustin finished Max
in the first round. And Max Holloway's UFC debut comes in getting some style points on Dustin Poirier. I'm just like, yo, who is this Hawaiian kid coming out here doing this to Dustin? And then Dustin takes his ass down and transitions to mount, puts him in a mounted triangle armbar and finishes him. It was just nasty. He's the only person to finish Max Holloway.
Yo, so that's crazy. Okay, hold on. I got Dustin's record.
It's hard to say Dustin is not one of the greatest lightweights of all time. Can I say he's the GOAT? Because obviously Khabib is there who beat him. But then Khabib is no longer competing, and Khabib competed half as many times as Dustin. I'm telling you, if Khabib competed as many times as Dustin, I think the conversation today is completely different, and I say that respectfully.
Okay, my only thing that I think stops it from where you could definitively say Dustin is like the GOAT is like one, he only had one. If he beats Islam, it's just he's on his first title victory. Khabib had 5 or 4.
Yeah.
And then Khabib beat him.
Was it 5? No, it wasn't 5.
I think 4. It was 4.
He beat Al for the vacant.
And then
he beat Gaethje,
Dustin, Conor.
So 3.
No, title victories, I said.
Well, you didn't say title victory. You said titles.
We could replay it. I said title victory.
You didn't say title victory.
I did.
Okay. Well,
God strike me dead if I'm lying right now.
We're gonna hear this.
Okay, we will.
Back on the replay, guys.
If he beats Islam, it's just he's on his first title victory. I want you guys to like this video if I said title victories.
Didn't happen.
Okay. Anyway. So yeah, 4 for Khabib, and then it would be 1 for Dustin. But the other thing is like Dustin lost to Charles and Khabib.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to say.
I even make the argument for Charles Oliveira, but Charles Oliveira has been the champ, and if Charles were to win the belt again, I think that changes his argument as well. It's hard to say who is the actual GOAT. I think all those guys are in a race, in the running. Who is the most dominant? Khabib Nurmagomedov. Who is the greatest lightweight of all time? I think it's hard to ignore Charles Oliveira.
Yeah.
And I think for Dustin to do it, I think he would probably have one of the most decorated careers that you could ever say grace the octagon at 155 pounds and 145.
That's hard to like. So then it literally just goes back to, again, what do you prioritize in that discussion?
And if you're going to just say dominance, then okay, then the argument's over. Then it's just going to be Khabib.
And also...
But he also fought a heck of a lot less than any of those other guys.
But the aura. It's the aura.
Yeah, you can have the aura, but...
That's what it is, bro. You're just... Because he never even looked like he was going to lose.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that. I mean, he's had moments that were like, but then he just comes back and takes right over again.
It felt like if Khabib kept fighting, no one would have beat him for a while. That's how it felt to me.
That did not feel like that to me.
Really?
Did not feel like that to me. Because I feel like now when he retired was when the competition was finally getting really good in terms of competitive grappling. Arman Shayukian, Gamrot. When those guys start to come around, guys who can actually grapple, it changes the entire game of the fight. Because now you got guys who can compete with you in that department. If you watch the Islam debut of Arman Shayukian, that fight, short notice, and Arman gave him all he could handle in the grappling department. Took him down multiple times, reversed him a couple of times, got taken down a bunch as well. But you see the grappling exchanges, it lets you know if someone can actually grapple, it changes the complexity of the fight.
1,000%, but
he still won.
None of those guys that you just mentioned have even really come to the title yet.
Well, they were all, when Khabib was the champ, these guys were not even real thoughts.
Yeah, exactly.
In the company yet.
So it's like...
Or not even in the company yet.
I still feel like Khabib could have been champ today if he kept fighting. To be honest.
I mean, like, if he continued to fight once a year, probably.
Okay, fair. I do feel like back then when he retired, I still wasn't as invested in. I didn't know too much. Like I wasn't as big of a fan as I am now. And as a casual fan, it felt like he had the unbeatable aura. like John Jones does right now. That's how Khabib felt to like me and all my friends. That's how he felt to us.
I guess that's to
and that's
you
the most
guys
UFC fans I
versus
feel.
the actual fighters. Because I compete, so I'm like I just don't feel like I would ever think like that.
I don't think you could ever think anyone has that aura.
Yeah, I would just not.
And me now, I know how this sport is. I know the realities of it. Like I felt like you had that aura. You know what I mean? To me, like I felt that, but like I just don't think it's possible now to just be unbeatable. You know?
Yeah, especially when you're in the sport. Then
Yeah,
you know
when you,
for
and
certain.
you see
You're
it
like,
all, like
oh, I can actually lose.
and like when you're a casual fan, you don't even know the ins and outs of a training camp. You don't even know anything about a training camp. Now that I've seen so many training camps up close, I'm like, oh, like against Henry, like on paper, to me you should beat Henry every time, but you also had a bicep injury that whole camp. You know what I mean? So like that made things like that made the waters a little shakier. So it's like you never know like what someone's going through in an actual fight or like leading up to a fight.
Yeah, it is what it is, man. I like if we're going back to will Dustin be the GOAT? I'm gonna say it'd be hard to say that, but I think he is up there in a three-headed race between him, Charles Oliveira, and Khabib, in terms of the three most decorated competitors at 155 pounds right now. Oliveira, if Oliveira could get back to a title shot, he could change things. And if Islam could win over Dustin, add to his resume, I think it puts him in that conversation. He's now beginning to enter that conversation if he beats Dustin. Because right now he's beat Volkanovski twice.
Yeah.
You beat Charles Oliveira. And I don't care what nobody says. If you're telling me that Charles Oliveira was the same exact Charles Oliveira that showed up for any of those other fights, you're lying. You're lying straight through your teeth.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that doesn't matter. He won. He beat the guy that was in there. That's fine. But if you're going to say that was the same exact guy, that wasn't the man.
And then what he came back and did to Beneil.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think if you follow the sport closely, then you understand what I'm talking about. If you don't, then you're going to think I'm a hater and you're going to say whatever you want to say. Whatever. At the end of the day, I call it how I see it. And I think if Islam beats Dustin, I think he enters that conversation. And I think if he could get one or two more title wins, he is now up there with a Khabib, with a Dustin Poirier in terms of the caliber of his career and all the guys he's beaten. Because if you look at a lot of his fights, a lot of them have been short notice opponents. He's finished those guys and did what he's supposed to do. But I think people would like, for me, as a competitor, I want to see the best against the best at their best. So when you have these asterisks next to your wins, it kind of changes things. And I know people say the same thing about my title fights or whatever. Oh, Dillashaw had one hand. I'm like, well, he didn't have one hand until we all found out that he had one arm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The Henry fight, he came off the couch after 3 years. And I think that was the best Henry's looked in a very long time. People didn't say that about John Jones, but for some reason against me, it now matters. It's like, well, he's not John Jones. I'm like, well, he was considered
the
greatest combat athlete of all time.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden, it doesn't count. So people are going to move the bar no matter what. I think it just depends on the person that you ask and what they use as their criteria for the most part. So again, I think it's a three-headed race between Khabib, Oliveira, Dustin Poirier.
If Dustin wins.
Yeah. If he didn't, he still had a hell of a damn career, man. Interim champion, that counts for something.
To go on 3 title runs.
It's not easy.
I think he's already a surefire Hall of Famer.
Oh, 100%. Look at all the other people. And
he was interim champion.
How many other people in his division was able to accomplish half of what he did?
Yeah.
You know?
It's been like him and Gaethje kind of like on that crazy, like holding the top 5.
Bro, they've been fighting each other nonstop.
Yeah, it's like
Gaethje,
but then kind of
Poirier,
like Dustin
Conor.
outlasted him kind of.
Yeah.
It's in some crazy way because Gaethje knocked him out. But like.
Yeah. And then who else is in that top 5? Oliveira, Gaethje,